How to build a plyometric box. I used a 1/2 inch sheet of plywood and some 2x3s, glued together with some PL Premium and some wood screws. For tools, I used a cordless drill, saw, tape measure, caulking gun, and a trim router. In order to have a finished box of 16 by 20 by 24 inches using 1/2 inch plywood, I first built a solid wood frame using 2x3s to a finished dimension of 1 inch smaller in all 3 directions. Taking into account the width and thickness of the 2x3s, I cut each piece to a finished length of 4 pieces at 12 inches, 4 pieces at 18 inches, and 4 pieces at 19 inches. To assemble the frame, I started by drilling 3-inch long wood screws into the 19-inch long pieces. These pieces would then be attached to the 12-inch long pieces, creating a frame 19 inches by 15 inches. When we add the 1/2 inch plywood onto the 4 sides, we'll get the finished size we're looking for, 20 inches by 16 inches. The last step to building the Plyobox frame was to take the 2 completed frames and add the spacers in between them. Adding the 2.5 inch width of each frame to the 18-inch piece put in between them gives the box a finished length of 23 inches. With the 2 1/2 inch pieces of plywood on either end, we'll get our finished width of 24 inches. I did this by first toeing in some 3-inch wood screws into the spacer pieces. This made it a little bit easier to get them screwed in. I did debate the direction to place the spacers. I did ultimately decide it would be the strongest if they were directed in the same direction as the longer pieces. The finished frame should be 15 inches by 19 inches by 23 inches. For cutting the plywood panels, I cut 2 pieces at 16 by 20, 2 pieces at 16 by 23, and 2 pieces at 19 by 23. I would have loved to have had a table saw to do this, but I don't own one, so I use a circular saw with a guide. My guide was just a level, straight edge clamp to the boards. To add handhold to the Plyobox, I use a 1-inch spade bit to drill 2 1-inch holes 2.5 inches down from the top edge of the plywood. I chose 2.5 inches down on center so that the top of the hole is going to be flush with the bottom edge of the 2x3 frame. I clamped a piece of scrap wood behind the plywood so that when I went through with the spade bit, I wouldn't destroy the back of the boards. After the holes were drilled, I used a edging tool to cut out the space between the 2 holes. A jigsaw would have been great here. Fortunately, I don't own a jigsaw. Doing the best with what I got. To assemble the frames, I used PL Premium wood adhesive, or construction adhesive. I put a thin coat around the plywood 2x4 frame, and then I used number 8 1.5 wood screws to attach the panels to the outside of the frame. I pre-drilled all my holes and started with screws in opposite corners on each panel. It took a lot of time here to make sure that the panels were exactly where I needed them to be, and then I added extra screws every 6 to 8 inches along the outside of the panel. I started with the biggest panels first, the 19 by 23, and then moved on to the medium size, 16 by 23, and finished with the smallest panels on the outsides, 16 by 20. Once the box was assembled, I used a trim router and a flush tool to flush all the edges, and then I went back and used a 1/4 inch round over bit to round all the edges. After the edges were flushed and rounded, I used an 80 grit and 100 grit sandpaper to surface the box to prep it for decals and finish. To label the sides of my boxes, I printed off 3 decals that said 16, 20, and 24. The decals had to be printed backwards and with toner using a laser printer. The solvent I used was called xylene. The decals also had to be flipped backwards so that when they transferred off the paper onto the plywood, they would be the right way. I did have to do a number of test samples with the solvent. I found that too much or too long would cause the decals to bleed, but not enough wouldn't cause or wouldn't allow the decal to fully transfer over onto the wood. To add extra durability to my Plyobox, I finished it with 2 coats of water-based varnish. I use an outdoor varnish so I can use my box outdoors as well as indoors. On the test samples for the decals, I did try adding a decal over the varnish, but the toner just kind of sat on top and wasn't able to get absorbed into the plywood. So if you're going to put decals on your Plyobox, it's important to make sure you do that step before you put on the protective finish. Here's the finished plywood box. Thanks for watching my videos, my first one. Hope you liked it. Thanks for watching.